So today we're going to have the hormone talk. We're actually going to have part of it. There's a lot of hormones to discuss when it comes to perimenopause and menopause and fat loss and nutrition and all of that. So today I'm going to cover the 2 hormones related to nutrition. One thing that's important to know is when we talk about hormones, like female hormones, most people think you're talking about, or like hormones related to fat loss. Most people think you're talking about estrogen and progesterone. In fact, quite often when we talk hormones, that's what people think. The first ones that come to mind, I think, are just estrogen and progesterone. But there are a whole bunch of hormones involved in all of your bodily functions and systems. And so one we're going to talk about today is insulin. So I know that most of you have probably heard about insulin in relationship to diabetes. So insulin is what we would call our blood sugar hormone. And so what insulin's job is that when you eat a starchy carbohydrate, actually when you eat any food, insulin is produced. Insulin's job, all that food is, any food is turned to sugar in the bloodstream. Insulin's job is to come and take the sugar out of the bloodstream and store it in the muscle, because too much sugar in the bloodstream is considered corrosive. It creates a little crust around the cells. And when there's a crust around the cells, the messages can't get through from cell to cell. So your body isn't going to function properly if there's a crust. It has to knock on the door and poke its way in, the message. So this might look like fatigue, for example. And because the cell's trying really hard to get the message, things aren't getting across, things are missing, the communication is misfiring, okay? So when we eat a food, it turns into sugar, insulin takes the sugar out of the bloodstream. Now, different foods will turn to sugar at different rates. So starchy carbohydrates, potatoes, rice, pasta, sugars, like literal, food sugar, fruit, all the whites, basically, things that are low in fiber and are starchy are going to turn to sugar quite quickly, okay? And so this means that the more sugar we have dumped into the bloodstream at one time, the more insulin that we need to produce to take care of the job, right? So the problem is that insulin is a fat storage hormone. So when you are continually producing insulin throughout the day, because maybe before you started this program, you were eating starch at breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, and dinner. And so it was getting introduced to starchy carbohydrates throughout the day. And then your body had to produce insulin to take care of it, which means that you were basically in a fat storage state all throughout the day, which some of you might be like, oh, that's probably what was going on. Okay, so that's one piece of the puzzle. Now, as I said before, all foods will turn to sugar, but things that are high in protein, things such as meats and yogurts, cottage cheese, things like that, will turn at a slower rate. They will turn from the food to sugar at a slower rate because protein takes some time and some work to break down in the gut. So this slows the rate at which that food turns to sugar. The other things are fats, healthy fats like avocados, things that are coconut oil based, those fatty fish. Fats slow the rate at which food turns to sugar in the bloodstream, as well as fiber. So all those vegetables or those high fibery, maybe it's a bread, but it's a really high fiber bread. Maybe it's a whole wheat, like a true chunky whole wheat kind of bread, not the kind that's colored to look like wheat, okay? So those are things. The fat, the protein, and the carbohydrates are slower to break down in the gut, and so they turn to sugar more slowly. It's kind of like a trickle effect. So one of the reasons that the meal plans are designed as they are, where we talked about, 2 good handfuls of vegetables, and then the protein the size of the palm of your hand, and then the slice of carbohydrates, like 5 to 7 bites of carbohydrates. This is why. It's because what we're trying to achieve is a balance on your plate so that those carbohydrates, when they do come in, are going to be mixed in with your protein and your vegetables, and all of that is going to slow the rate at which those carbs turn to sugar. So that coming into play, it's really important to remember that you never want to eat a carbohydrate all by itself. If I have just a piece of bread, I'm going to get a big shot of blood sugar, and then I'm going to get a big dose of insulin to take care of it, and then I'm going to be in fat storage mode. You want to think in terms of all of your meals should be somewhat balanced. I use this phrase PFC every 3. So protein, fiber, fat, and carbs every 3 hours-ish. Okay, so your meals and your snacks should all be a balance of those. So if you're gonna have, I don't know, let's say if you're gonna have something like half an English muffin, don't just eat that by itself. Eat that half an English muffin with a hard-boiled egg, or maybe a piece of fruit. Having your piece of fruit with a protein as well. So cottage cheese and fruit, because that protein in the cottage cheese will slow the rate at which that fruit turns to sugar. I get this question a lot. Can I substitute my, sugary cravings with fruit? You can, but it is important to remember that fruit is a healthy food, okay? It has tons of nutrients and it has a lot of things that your body needs, and that's great, that's healthy. But it also is not necessarily a fat loss food, because if eaten by itself, it turns to sugar quickly, and then you get that whole insulin response and you turn into fat storage mode. Okay, so again, you want to eat fruit in limited quantities at one time in particular. I usually recommend people eat their fruit after a workout, because your body is sensitive to using that insulin. It's called insulin sensitive. You've just done your workout, you've ramped up your metabolism. Your body's like, wow, we just burned all of those blood sugars during that exercise. So we can do something with this fruit that just came in. We can put this to good use without necessarily having to produce. Let's just think of it as like your energy systems are revved. Your body can put that to good use without having to dump a big chunk of insulin into the bloodstream to take care of it, okay? So that's one piece of it. The other thing to remember is that as menopausal women, you have become more, those of you that are, and those of you that are not, if you're still perimenopause, just put this in the hopper. I think it's really important for perimenopausal women to start eating like a menopausal woman, because eventually you're going to wake up one day, as many of you menopausal women will probably wake up and be like, what happened here? It's like you've had these habits, you didn't know how to make the adjustments, and you woke up one day and were like, I don't know how to get rid of this midsection weight. So those of you that have not hit menopause yet, or like right in the middle of it, this is a great way to start changing your eating habits now, so that you have a handle on it, and now you have the tools to take care of it if you start putting on weight for hormonal reasons. So menopausal / perimenopausal women we could call you insulin resistant. Okay, this is what happens. And that's a term that you'll hear used with diabetics. They're insulin resistant. So that means that with a decline of estrogen, you're not as easily, or you're not as skilled. Let's say your body is not as in tune with using the blood sugars up. It needs the insulin to come out and do the job. And what happens is then insulin, usually what will happen is you get that blood sugar, you get insulin coming out, putting it in the muscle. But after a while of doing this, and maybe you've been eating this way, carbs at every meal and carbs at every snack, if you've been eating this way for a while, the insulin in your body or your pancreas, your insulin is pumping out, and your body's like, you know what, I've been telling you all this time, I've been trying to deal with your sugar all this time, and you keep eating the sugar and the starches, and it becomes resistant to doing its job. That's what insulin resistance is. So what happens is you start producing the insulin, okay? And the insulin just doesn't take the sugar out of the bloodstream like it used to. So now you are in fat storage mode because you're producing that insulin, but also the insulin just picked up a lawn chair and is kicking back. It's like, dude, I tried to tell you over and over, cut out the sugar, cut out the starches. I tried to show you by gaining weight for you, and I've been doing my job and you're not listening. So it becomes resistant to doing its job. So now you have sugars building up in your bloodstream, causing more insulin to be produced, and the insulin is putting you in fat storage mode. So this is probably the biggest thing you can do as a perimenopausal woman, is to reduce the starches. And I'm not saying go no starch and eliminate all starches. As you heard me say before, we do need carbohydrates for energy and for fuel. But this is the first thing you probably want to really focus on if you're feeling like your weight gain is menopausal or perimenopausal related. Sorry, I had something on the stove. That's probably one of the first places, and I know that can be a hard pill to swallow quite often because they're hard to get rid of at times. That's why meal plans like these are great, because they lay it out for you, so you don't have to go through the agony of being like, oh, what am I going to eat? If I'm not eating starches, what am I going to eat? Okay. So know that it's a physiological thing. I know our brain is like, but the starches, I love the starches. But I believe that once you understand what's going on physiologically in your body, it's a lot easier to know that if I eat that bagel and I eat that whole bagel all by itself, I'm going to be in fat storage mode for, write this one down, for 3 to 4 hours after that high blood sugar meal. That's a long time to be in fat storage mode. So let's say you're the girl that eats a bagel for breakfast on your way out the door. So between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock, you're in fat storage mode because you got that, it's turning to sugar, the insulin's coming out, trying to deal with it. You're in fat storage mode from 7 to 10. You have a snack at 10. You have a handful of pretzels and a banana. Again, a piece of fruit. Turns to sugar quickly. We're still in fat storage mode until lunchtime. Then you go to Mr. Sub and you get a sandwich, which has some meat and vegetables, but it also has proportionately has a large amount of carbohydrates. And then you have some chips and maybe a soda. This was the old you, of course, right? Then you're back in fat storage mode. So if you kept that going all day long, you're in fat storage mode all day long. So by making these simple adjustments and reducing your carbohydrate intake based on your activity level, sorry, this hair is kind of driving me nuts, and making sure that you have those balanced plates, protein, fiber, fat, and carbohydrates, a small amount of carbohydrates at each meal, you're going to drastically affect your blood sugar. There's a huge percentage of women after menopause that become diabetic. And this is why, because the estrogen was helping us balance out the insulin. It wasn't asking insulin to work so hard to get to the point of having to be resistant. But as estrogen declined, the insulin's like, hey, I'm working real hard, getting real tired of it, pulling up the lawn chair and just hanging out and watching the show of sugar raising in your bloodstream. So that's how that works physiologically. So that is one of the biggest reasons, that is the biggest reason that we have the meal plans designed the way they are. It's also, insulin ties in with a lot of other things as we'll get talking as we go along. But know that estrogen, we always think about estrogen and progesterone being just the girl hormones and, affecting, can we have babies? Can we not have babies? Do we have periods? Do we not? But there is so much more that estrogen is responsible for and was helping our bodies with. And as it declines, that's why we tend to have the symptoms that we have in menopause. And we'll be covering those as we go. But one of the first ones I like to cover so that you can really get a handle on the fat loss is to cover that carbohydrate, that sugar, and the fruit situation. So I want you guys to say it out loud, how I just explained it. Go back and listen. And I want you to explain it to somebody, a friend, somebody in your household, somebody at the gym. Try to explain the process. I'm going to be super simple. Hold on. Just about to get interrupted. Yep. Time's up. Just explain the process.